Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about different types of assessments and the reason why performance-based assessment is actually a lot better. So, first we have summative assessments, which allows you to use different types of selection and supply questions that kind of help stimulate good teaching, which refers to what teachers do during the instructions. You're also able to judge the success of a process at its completion. So when you get down to like the end of your lecture or process after you've done teaching your students, you can actually implement some high-level thinking questions to kind of gauge whether or not your students are actually grasping the information. It also gives teachers a summary of what students can do as a result of their teaching. So at the end, you give like a quiz or like a homework assignment. You can use that summative assessment to really let you know where your mindset of your students are. However, it can sometimes not be effective teaching, which refers to the outcome of instruction. So it'd be like, did they actually learn and are they really retaining any information? Another big problem is you have to wait until the end of the lecture to actually make any type of adjustment. So if you lose anybody in the middle of the actual lecture, it could cause them to be demotivated to not want to actually do anything or try to backtrack and actually learn what they didn't get. You can't change students' way of thinking about the process or teaching until the end of the teaching, which is what we just kind of talked about. And then there's also like a lot of guessing involved. When you use questions like multiple choice or matching that don't really tap into like that higher level thinking. Yeah? Alright. So next we have formative assessments. You can actually use the formative assessments to alter or improve instruction while it's actually still going on. So what you can do is you can throw in high-level thinking questions or maybe like a small quiz or a homework assignment maybe not a homework assignment, but in between your actual lectures, so that way it kind of gauges whether or not your students are actually gathering the material while you're going through it, which allows you to kind of make adjustments and assessments that you give to the students to test their knowledge and concepts of the process that you're going through while you're actually still teaching it. You can also test information like recalling or like identifying, and you also have the ability to control the flow of the classroom and influence the form of the everyday processes that are the core teachings of the actual lesson that you're doing. You can still use supply and selection questions as well as short answers and matching with the formative assessments. You can still use these type of assessments to actually tap into like that higher level thinking. The downside is during the lecture or process, so you don't really get a chance to see what the students can do on their own because you're always basically like readjusting them, reevaluating, and kind of help guiding them on the right track. So you really don't get a chance to just let them explore and do their own thing. It doesn't really have a lot of high-level thinking questions, but you can gear your questions, like the supply and the short answer questions, to tap into like that higher level thinking. It's very informal. You have like quick homework assignments and quizzes and worksheets that you can kind of pass out, but again, it's a lot of guessing that's involved, and it doesn't really tell you whether or not they actually get it themselves. There's so many different things that students can do as far as like guessing or trying to just recall basic data instead of really knowing whether or not they can handle that real world situation. Okay. Next, we actually have official assessments, which actually give you the ability to answer questions like the ones that are taught inside of class. So these official assessments are like these achievement-giving tests that allow your students to be like, hey, I've achieved something major. So it's a big test that you get at the end of a lesson that offers students achievements after completion of an assessment. It really taps into higher level thinking by asking higher level questions. So that's the reason why at the end of it you achieve something like a certification or going to the next grade or something like that because you finish this official assessment that says, hey, this person knows and is efficient with these set of skills. It also helps prepare students for real world situations. The downside to these official assessments are the objectives may not be aligned with the questions. So what happens is your questions that you're teaching aren't really validated because they're not really holding true to what you're trying to teach your students. Students may not be familiar with the test questions, so if you don't actually teach what they're learning, then they're kind of going to not grasp what's going on the test. Adds a lot of pressure to your students, like test anxiety, worrying whether or not they're actually going to be able to answer the questions right in the first place. Then it's very time consuming, you know, and there's always a lot of items that must be constructed, so it's not only stressful on the students, but also on the people that actually like build these tests. And then last but not least, we have what we're all waiting for, your performance-based assessments. It allows students to demonstrate what they know and can do in a real-world situation. It also taps into both higher and lower level thinking and uses critical thinking skills to troubleshoot real-world issues. It provides a rich evidence of performance skills, letting the teacher know exactly what a student can do based off the completion of the actual assignment. And it emphasizes the use of available skills and knowledge in a relevant problem context. So if I'm teaching about Photoshop and I ask my students to actually go and create me a layer mask assignment, and not only do they create a layer mask assignment, all their masks are actually clean, it's saved right, it really shows me as a teacher, as a graphics teacher, that hey, my students, they understand all the terminology for layer mask, and they understand how to navigate in Photoshop and actually create a layer mask. However, performance-based assessments, it relies heavily on fine motor and development skills as well as verbal and auditory skills as well. So if you have special education kids or students with special needs, it can get kind of like rough if they don't have like a one-on-one or somebody to help guide them through these issues. And it can sometimes have a really, really long list of criteria. So you have to create a layer mask, you have to save your work, you have to name it the right way, you have to have a filter, all these different criteria to come up with this performance-based assessment. However, it tests them on these real-world situations. If they become a graphic designer or a mathematician or something like that, they're used to being under this pressure that you're going to be when you're in the real world. And then last but not least, the rubric may not always be accurate or does not match up to your objectives. So these are all the things that you're kind of going to have to think about when you're coming up with like these performance-based assessments. However, they really give you an opportunity to see what your students can do based off the final product. There's no guessing involved. It's legitimately, once you finish this assignment, I'll know exactly what you can do based off the completed assignment. Okay? Thanks, guys.